Okay. Um, Greetings. My name is Diana Rendon, and this is my fourth video out of five for Pasantías Preprofesionales 2, second bimester. In this video, I will explain how I would approach a 45-minute class for students in first of baccalaureate. Today's topic is stories of all kinds. Um, as promised in my previous video, I am talking about grades other than the second of baccalaureate, segundo de bachillerato. Since I am approaching stories during this lesson, I aim to teach learners to identify the main elements of a story, which are main characters, a setting. A setting is the word the story is set in, the conflict of the story, what is motivating the protagonist, and the resolution, how they resolve the conflict. Once the story has been comprehended and the elements of the story identified, I will aim to teach the students how to skim or scan a text for information. Um, to scan or skim a text for information, one must pay special attention to or read the title, the introduction of the text, any heading or subheading, and the conclusions. Paying special attention to the first sentence and concluded paragraph can be of help to quickly gather information from a text without fully engaging in it. Another useful tip is to look at any available illustrations, pictures, graphs, tables, or diagrams. For this lesson, I will be using the communicative language teaching methodology to promote communication during the lesson. Um, and a task-based approach after the topic has been introduced because I want the students to practice what they learn. But remember, when you are using a task-based methodology, uh, for it to be effective, the activities or task must be of interest to the learners. And finally, for the final methodology I will use is community language learning, which I already explained on video number 1. Moving on to the anticipatory set, I use the assistance of the educational platform ThinkLink to briefly talk about various genres of fiction. Among these genres will be a story from Greek mythology, which are the kinds of stories I wish to share during this lesson. Allow me to share my screen. Okay. As I have explained before, ThinkLink allows teachers to share pictures with useful links in them. And for today's topic, we have here a few different genres of fiction or stories. If the viewer copies the link from my lesson plan and goes to this page, you can um, you can see the images I have selected, and you can pass your cursor over the icons and get a level of what each image represents. In my presentation, we have fantasy stories, which feature castles, magic, and interesting creatures. Futuristic stories, or cyberpunk as they are colloquially known, which are stories that imagine a future in which humans combine their bodies with technology. Androids are a common feature of this genre. Next up is Twitter. And this is an illustration of the quite famous Hamlet from Shakespeare. Down here, we have H.P. Lovecraft's stories, which horror stories, which aim to explore and inspire fear within the reader. Next up, we have comedies, and finally here, the topic of the lesson. which is Greek mythology. This is an illustration of Apollo or Phoebus, that, according to Greek mythology, is the god of life, music, healing, prophecy, knowledge, art, and song. Um, Busy guy. Eh? Once the students have engaged with the presentation, I ask them to tell me about their favorite genres or the stories that caught their attention. Next up is greeting the class and the warm-up activity. I selected a short TED video that explains how the Olympics can be. TED videos are not only useful and entertaining, but also educational. Not to mention that they have subtitles in many different languages, as well as a variety of topics that can be shared with the learners depending on the topic to be approached during the lesson. As you can see, this video explains that a festival dedicated to the Greek god Zeus in the small town of Olympia took place every 4 years. This sport competition has become the standard of excellence for many athletes. You can see, and the video has subtitles and it's colorful and has images to go along with the audio to help struggling students comprehend what is being said through context. The video explains the origins of the Olympics in a fun, engaging way and also shares a few interesting stories and little nuggets of information and knowledge about all traditions. Okay. After the students watched the video, I asked them to tell me about the bits of information that caught their attention using a communicative language teaching methodology during this segment of the lesson. That is paying special attention to communication without letting errors stop the flow of the conversation. I follow this by explaining the objectives of the lesson and presenting a popular Greek myth to the class. I selected the myth of Perseus uh, because it may be familiar to the students and have many interesting elements as well as a happy ending, which is a rarity in Greek mythology. The hero Perseus used his reflection to kill the monster Medusa and save the princess Andromeda. Allow me to share my screen once more. Okay. Here we have the text. I present a short version of the story to the class and ask them to skim it or scan it for information, after which they must go to the teaching platform, thatquiz.org, and answer some comprehension questions. Here we have the text, and as always, the students, uh, allow me. Here we have the teaching platform. The students do not need to register on the website. They only need to copy the link, paste it on the lower right corner of the page, select their names, and begin testing. For the final part of the lesson, I ask students to identify the main elements of a story. Um, Allow me to share my screen once more. Excuse me. Okay. I ask the students to um, organize the elements of a story in this chart. Here we have the chart with main characters, settings, conflict, resolution, and a summary. I will ask the students to write a summary of the story as follow-up or homework. In modeling, I help the students learn to better scan a text to detect important information. For guided practice, I ask them to discuss their opinions and attitudes regarding the stories we share during the lesson with a partner. And for independent practice, I ask the students to work on page 41 of their books, completing a chart about a story introduced there. For assessment, I ask the students to name a random element of the story. For example, who was the main character or the protagonist of the story? Where does the story set in? Finally, for the closing review, I talk about a short Greek myth and fill in the chart provided for the students to review the lesson. Like, for example, the myth of Arachne, which was turned into a spider after losing a contest with the goddess Athena. This is a short, simple myth. I will use it to review the lesson, uh, touch on every single element of the story and what we studied during the lesson. I believe that is all for today's lesson. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on video number 5. Bye.